Yeah, hi everyone. This is a demo starting drawing and painting in Illustrator for Design 103, the photography and fine art section. So I'm in Illustrator already, and I'm going to show you some of the fundamentals. I open an Illustrator, create new or file new document. So say create new. And it's going to give you a series of presets or of many preset options. We're going to make a custom sized document. I think in your instructions it said that you could work 12 by 12 or 12 by 16, and then that would be the print that you would actually print. So we're working real size, something that you would print on a large size Epson bright white paper. So you could call it prelims or concept for project one in your name, or just that if you're putting it onto your own computer. And I'm going to work in a rectangular format, not 12 by 12, but 12 by 16. So I'm going to work landscape orientation, but you can work portrait orientation if you prefer. And we're going to make the width be 16 then, and the height would be 12. This is on your instruction sheet for the project as well. So notice it automatically makes it landscape. Now I asked you to do at least 9 of these. So put in the number 9 where it says artboards. No bleed, which is the next option. Keep it CMYK color because you'll be working in the rest of the course in CMYK color. There are only 2 options in Illustrator, RGB and CMYK. And you might as well make the raster effects medium. Actually, if we're printing photography, if you're working photographically for this class, probably the raster effect should be high, 300 ppi. And if you were to place any photos, then they would be at a high rasterization. Go to more settings at the bottom, and you'll see that another dialog box pops up. And it gives you all the specifications that you already put in. But why don't you make the arrangement of the artboards vertical? So I'm clicking on the 4th option over. It shows a vertical arrangement. And also the spacing, the default is very small. So I'm going to put in a much bigger spacing between artboards so that you can have things that jut out from the artboard. Because remember I said that your shapes could overlap the artboard. The artboard edge is where things stop printing. So if you were to print this, even if you have things overlapping the edge of the artboard, they will not print. So I'm going to put in 2 inches between artboards. And it gives me the height that I already put in. I don't know why it has 0.1 inches. You could take that out. And it's putting in peculiarly enough some measurements for me now that I didn't ask it to sometimes. And then just say create document. Notice that I have 9 artboards now. Now these are within the same document. So artboards are like pages. But in Illustrator, and I'm going to go over the tools in a minute, the artboard tool, which is right above the hand tool, I have my tools here in a double arrangement. If you want to make them a single arrangement, you click on the double arrow at the top of the tools panel. And it'll become a single arrangement. But the classic arrangement of tools is double. It used to be, and when you're working on a laptop, it's actually easier to have it a double arrangement because you can see them better. They don't extend out, you know, the bottom of the window. Also, I'm working in, up here it says Essentials Classic. So either Essentials or Essentials Classic is fine. What that does is give you the same tools that I'm going to be showing you, okay? So Essentials Classic is my workspace. If I click on the arrow that shows you all the different workspaces, notice the different workspaces that you can use now in Illustrator. And they're customized to what you're doing. You can change in Illustrator, unlike any other Adobe program, you can change the size of an artboard specifically for that artboard. In InDesign, you cannot do that because books, InDesign is meant to create publications, and books are usually all the same size. So if you were making a book that had different size pages for some reason, you would be tempted to do it in Illustrator, because in Illustrator, let me show you, you can change just one size, one artboard size. So you could go to this artboard and say, I want this to be smaller, and up on the control bar, you can actually, oh, I know what's my Zoom control is in the way here. I'll move it down for a minute. Notice that the control bar always pertains to whatever you're doing. So in this case, I'm trying to change the size of an artboard, and I could do it in my control bar above, or I can actually do it by pulling. Notice, pulling at the size, at the artboard. So pull at handles, and you can change it, or you can enter it here. For instance, let's say I was going to do a radial composition. I'm going to undo. Command Z is undo. And go to the bottom where I'm doing my radial compositions. Hold Shift when you do any kind of multiple selection in Illustrator. So I'm holding Shift, and notice that I've selected more than one artboard. This also holds true of objects in Illustrator. So any objects. So hold Shift and you can create a multiple selection. And let's say I want these to be squares because I want my radial compositions to be in a square format. So I'm going to put in, where it says width, I'm going to put in 12 and hit return. And all of those then change size. So that's a very useful thing in Illustrator, that you can change the size of an artboard. You can think of different, uses for that. So in this assignment, I have I'm doing 9 preliminary studies. And you can type with the type tool if you want to. You could type right on the clipboard. In Illustrator, you can put things on the clipboard. In Photoshop, there is no clipboard, so you can't do that. And but I could, for instance, put here, I could type, but you would probably want the type to be big enough that you can really see it. So I'm going to make it 24 points maybe, and I'm going to type in symmetrical, but let's see, it's not big enough to even see. So that might not be, you'll just have to remember which is which, or maybe, as I said, you could, I'm going to try one more time. Type it in right here. And it would help if the color you were typing would be white, right? So you could see it better. I don't think you'll want to do this because it's just too much work, but I'm going to put symmetrical one shape. And Command 0 fits the artboard in the window. Command 0 fits it into the window. And now I need to find where I was typing. It was somewhere in here, somewhere. Well, I'll just type it again. So well, Yikes, I'm recording this too. There we go. So I'm going to say symmetrical. One shape. And you could label each one that you do because there's a clipboard that you can just type on in Illustrator. So this first one is going to be in the symmetrical column. If you were doing it as a grid, one shape. The second one would be two types of shapes. It's not actually one shape, it's two types of shapes, right? So I'm going to use circles. And here are, in Illustrator, here are the shapes, the geometric shapes that you're going to need to use and know. The rectangle shape, the ellipse tool will help you make circles. So every time, I'm going to use the rectangle tool and just show you. Every time you make a shape, if you hold shift, it'll become an equilateral shape or a shape that has equal sides. So the rectangle becomes a square. The circle, the ellipse becomes a circle. So I'll go to the ellipse tool. These are the geometric shapes. So the ellipse, I'm holding shift. The ellipse will become a circle. And notice that at the bottom, I have fill and stroke. Illustrator works with a fill and a stroke. So you want to have the fill box black and the stroke box black also, because if you lose your fill, it would be helpful to have that, that stroke. Usually you would probably just want, in this case, no stroke, because it would be better to work with just filled shapes. But just to help you, I'm making the stroke black also. In case you lose the fill, and the way you take out the fill is with the red stroke through it, such as that. And then you can say, this is none. So you can say no fill or no stroke, but we actually want it black. So first of all, why don't you make your document look like mine? And that has to do with the palettes. And most of you will open Illustrator and there'll be some sort of palette dock on the right. These are the palettes. And on the left, I already showed you the tools. The palettes that I have open are color swatches and stroke. And then I have some others because I was teaching another class how to do things, my digital class, how to do things with other of these, but you don't need them right now. All you need is color swatches and stroke. And they can be, that's your open palettes. These are the palettes that are active but not open. And that means that you've simply brought them up from where they are normally, and I'll be showing you the window, the menus in a minute, but it's in the window. All the palettes are in the window menu. So notice all the palettes that are in Illustrator. There's a lot of them, but we don't need very many for this project. So the way Illustrator works is there's two selection tools on top. And in order to do something to an object, you need to select it. That makes sense. Most of you understand that about computers. The computer doesn't know what you want to do unless you select the object. So when I select an object in Illustrator, there's handles that you can pull at. If you hold shift, the object is constrained. So it stays the same, but it just increases in size. Whatever handle you pull at if you hold shift. If you use the black selection tool, you can change the dimensions, but it stays a rectangle, notice. And you can move an object around. If it's filled, you can touch the filled part to move it around. If it's not filled, you have to touch an edge. If you wanted to actually change the nature of an object to just pull at one point, you have to use the white selection tool, which is called the direct selection tool. So I'm going to click away to deselect. You do that with both the selection tools. And then I'm going to go to the corner of this rectangle and notice that a little white point pops out. That was because in one of the first iterations of Illustrator, people who couldn't see complained, and they said, we can't see the point that we're actually trying to select. So they made it that when you hover above a point that you're selecting with the white selection tool, it becomes bigger. It becomes like a big, little, a bigger white point. So watch what happens when I use the white selection tools to select. I can put it anywhere. I can change the actual nature of the shape. So the white selection tool is always the more powerful tool. If you can't do something with the black selection tool, try the white one. Got it? So whenever you can't do anything with the black one, try the white one. So I've already taught you 2 commands that you should remember. Command Z, which is the most useful, undo. Command Z undoes whatever your last action was. It's a very useful part of working in computer, applications. And then I taught you Command 0, which fits your document, the artboard that you're working on into the window. But that works with every Adobe program also. Shift holds, constrains the action. So I said that I would make this first. I'm going to use as my one shape composition, one type of shape only, one geometric shape, I'm going to use the circle. So I showed you that the 2 selection tools that you need to know. I'm going to use the circle, and I'm going to use it as a very large circle. So I'm going to hold Shift and pull at the corners, and it's going to be overlapping the edge of the canvas, the edge of the artboard on the horizontal axis. So how do I find the horizontal axis? It would behoove you at this point to bring up the rulers. This will help you with this assignment. So go to View, and notice all the things that have to do with how you view a document. So go all the way down to Rulers and say Show Rulers. Now you need to pull some guides. So to pull guides, you click on a ruler, the part that would be wood or metal, and you just pull down or over. So the only 2 rulers you have are the top and the left, because you don't need them all the way around the document. You just need 2. And you're going to pull a horizontal and a vertical. So for this, I need to zoom out a little bit on this document. So if you go left with the zoom, which is the zoom tool, which is right next to the hand tool, it'll zoom out for you. And zooming in, you pull right. So I'm going to pull a guide. And you also want to make sure at some point that your guides are not locked, and I'll show you where you do that. So I'm going to click on the top ruler and just pull down. And we made this document 12 by 12. This is one of the square ones, it looks like, so I must be on a bottom one. Am I on one of my bottom artboards? Do you remember? Well, I can zoom out for a second and check it out, which one I'm on. That's weird. Yep, I'm on the first bottom one. All right, I'm going to do my radial composition with the circles, with one type of shape, radial. So I'm using one of my square artboards, but I needed to know whether this was a radial composition, right? And I'm pulling some guides that show me where the, and this guide actually will probably go over, this vertical guide I have found goes over all of the artboards. But the horizontal one doesn't, because I have a vertical arrangement of artboards. And I'm pulling down. Now I must have them unlocked because I was able to pull at this artboard, but sometimes you can't, at this guide, but sometimes you can't pull at it. So then in that case, you have to go to View and go to Guides and make sure they're unlocked. So guides, there they are, and just say unlock. It's a toggle. So right now, it only gives you the option of lock because the guides are unlocked, which is nice. So now I have my vertical and my horizontal, right? And And I'm going to arrange some of these circles. I decided for my one shape, I was going to use the circle. So I'm going to push this down. You can also use the arrows on your keyboard. And now I'm going to teach you another thing that you need to know. How to duplicate a shape. The easiest way to duplicate a shape is not up in the menu where you have to do edit, copy, edit, paste. What you should realize is that the fewer actions, the more efficient, right? In computer programs, the fewer actions you can do, the better. So I use Option or Alt on the PC, and I just pull a copy. So if you click with the black selection tool on your circle and hold Option on the Mac, Alt on the PC, and pull over, you'll have a copy. And I'm adjusting with the arrows on my keyboard, but you could also move it with the black selection tool. And I'm going to make 2 more of these. So I'm holding Option and copying. There's also a command called in the object menu, which is the most important menu in Illustrator, I think, that enables you to transform and make a copy. But I'm doing it with just one command, Option. And okay, so you notice right away that something is starting to happen. The white is being cut into. And it's being cut into in a very regular way by these black circles. It already starts to carve out a pretty regular shape in the white, right? So you already are cutting into the white negative space in such a way that it's making it into a rather positive shape. But let's do some more. One of the tricks to this is diminishing or refining or defining would probably be the best way to put it, the negative space, defining it more so that you make it more positive. By defining the negative space, you make it more positive. So this is harder than, as I said before, it's harder than it looks. I said I was going to use all circles, so I go back to the ellipse tool, hold Shift, and I'm pulling another circle. And let me show you what happens when it starts to actually touch the other circles. You really have created some negative definition. Can you see how these shapes now are starting to be defined? I actually don't like the middle one quite so big, so I'm going to make it a lot smaller and work with a sequence that might make a more interesting composition. So, because I like the fact that I'm getting this cutout feeling here. Even this on a gray background defines the white much more. The white actually has an identity now. So you want the white areas to start to have an identity. That's how to have equivocality in a very simple way. One of the requirements for this was to have different size shapes. So you have to use different size shapes. So I already have different size shapes. I have the white starting to have its own identity as its own shape. I am paying attention to the edge because I put things cut in a very, very regular or repetitious way by the edge. I'm paying attention to the center. So you don't have to pay attention to all of those things, just a few. When I said pay attention to the edge, the diagonal, the vertical, only a couple. You don't have to do all of them. So this already solves an issue, and it's radial. It needs to be the same in at least 4 different directions to be radial. Okay, to have radial symmetry, it needs to be the same in 4 different directions. It could be through the corners, or it could be on the vertical or horizontal axis. It needs to be the same in at least 4 different directions. And it's easiest to do in a square. one type of shape, using one type of shape, then using two types of shapes, then using three types of shapes. So you do that for each symmetrical, asymmetrical, and radial. And one of the most important parts of this is to try to make the negative areas speak. Make them more defined. We're going to use black shapes as our dominant color, but you will making the white strong. So I have one done. Now, another thing that I show people is that I have a few more things to show you for this project. You don't need much to do this project. But one thing that I didn't show people for a long time, and I should show you right now, is something called clipping mask. When I didn't show people, people would come in and they'd say to me, oh, I needed to know that. I spent forever looking for that. You should have shown us. And it's, what if you wanted to see your composition without the overlap, how it was going to print or how it was going to show up later as a PDF? You can put a clipping mask on it. And what a clipping mask is simply drawing a shape on top of everything and then selecting everything, and the top shape cuts the rest of them off. So it actually can be done with any group. Notice I'm using the black selection tool to draw a marquee. You don't want the word included, actually. I think it might be a bad idea to include this word, actually. So you're selecting everything by drawing a marquee with the black selection tool over it. That's the best way to decide what you want to act upon. Either click on it or draw a marquee around it with the black selection tool. Notice it highlighted everything that I had on that artboard. And then you go to Object, Clipping Mask, Make. And this is just if you want to see it without it clipped. The top shape clipped everything else. Okay? So you can leave it like that, but then you can't work on it anymore easily. So you can go backwards and do Command Z and it'll take the clipping mask out. Or you can use the white selection tool because the white selection tool selects within groups. So you can move things around with the white selection tool, but no, not the black. Because when things are grouped, the only tool you can use to move things around in the group is the white selection tool. Now, another thing I wanted to show you is the pen tool. Another thing that might help you do this, I don't always use it at all, but there's a grid that might help you in this project. So you can go to View and you can say Show Grid. And the grid, because you might have to, draw things in a grid, like on a grid, and instead of drawing a lot of guides, you can just use the grid. I want to show you the pen tool. The pen tool draws straight lines and curves, but right now we're not going to worry about the curves. You're just going to, and with black fill, you could make a triangle. Click, 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 click. So click, here I'm making my triangle. And go back to the point of origin so the shape is closed, and there's your triangle. So you need to know the pen tool to draw triangles, because there's no triangle tool. You can make triangles out of squares by deleting points on a square or a rectangle, and you don't really need to know this for this project, but I'll show you how to do it because the pen tool has a delete anchor point tool. Then I go into the pen tool group, and I say delete anchor point, and I delete a point, and all of a sudden you have a triangle. That might help if you were trying to make an equilateral triangle, for instance. I'm going to delete this one right now. Okay, let's see. What else did I want to show you? I really think that's it. That's all you need to know for this. But you might want to know how to reflect things. So that's in the object menu. And I'm looking at the tools. I don't think you need to know any of the other tools. We've done the closed shape tools, the geometric shape tools, and the pen tool is really all you need to know for this. As I said, the type tool, will you type anywhere, will let you type anywhere, and you can change the color, but I don't think you should do that. It gets too confusing. Just remember, write down what your, I think you can name artboards too. So if you go artboards palette, I think you can change the name of your artboards if you want. Yeah, so just go into your artboards palette. And if you don't have it up, go to window artboards. There's an artboards palette and you can name them. So then you can just name like radial composition with circle, radial with circle, right? Radial with circle and triangle. And I can read it if you abbreviate. Let's see. So let me show you the menus. In the Illustrator menu, you just have About Illustrator Preferences. The Preferences is good for many things. One of them that we need is the display. So if you want to make your display darker, like the artboard darker, I like to use a medium. But in interface, if you go down to user interface, it allows you to choose a display. And for this particular project, doing these, you might want a darker or lighter one. I kind of would like you to use one of the grays for this project because we're using white and black. And it's important to see it on a medium, on a neutral tone background, okay? Because we are using the white and the black as positive and negative. So you don't want to see it on white and you don't want to see it on black. That's actually one of the problems with when we do a critique on the white display boards at Art Center. It's better actually the way we're doing it right now. So choose a neutral color to do it on. Okay, so then in the file menu, you have open, close, save, save as, place is important. Later, you'll see when we work in Illustrator for our color project that we're gonna place things. So you can place almost any format that there is, JPEGs, almost anything can be placed in Illustrator, any kind of image. Edit has most of the things that a word processing or a normal program, any program has under edit, but you often use more steps than you would if you were using keyboard shortcuts. Object menu is the most important menu, especially for beginners in Illustrator, because you have transform, move, rotate, reflect, scale, and shear, and arrange, send to front, but we're not overlapping any objects in this, so you don't really need the arrange, but it's important. And then all sorts of things having to do with objects. Since Illustrator is a vector program, meaning a mathematically derived program, where the computer is constantly recreating mathematical formulas that determine the shapes, the lines and the edges of shapes and the fills of shapes, it allows you to go bigger and smaller without them changing the size of the file, which is really, really important to know and a really excellent attribute for graphics, for making graphics. So it's not a raster program. It's not a pixel-based program the way Photoshop is. So you all know that if you're working at a high resolution, Photoshop documents can be huge, right? So this is not like that. You can make it the size of a billboard and it won't be much bigger document. The reason I bring that up is because it's often called an object or vector object program. And so the most important menu, from my opinion, is the object menu. It allows you to do all sorts of things to objects. For instance, group would be something that you might want to do if you have things exactly the way, if you have 2 or 3 objects or a multitude of multiple objects exactly in the position you want, you might want to group them. Type we're not using. Select I don't use all that much because you just have to click away from something to deselect it. I don't really use it all that much. There is one important command in here, which is inverse, but we won't be using that. Effect, we're not using at all. View is important because you might want to change the view. some student always says to me, I don't see anything anymore. I don't see any colors to any of the objects. I don't see any of the objects with the attributes. And I say, change the view. There's only two views in Illustrator. One is called outline and the other one's called preview. And the weird thing is it shows you the one that isn't being used, the one that's not active. So if you see, if things change and all you see is a line like this, it's because you're in the wrong view. You have to change it to preview, okay? That might happen to you. Window has all the palettes. Oh, and in view, of course, are all the other things that you need to see but might not print, such as grid, guides. I always take off all the snap functions because they're annoying. Yeah, so these are all ways that you can view or not view things. And window has all the palettes. So I'm going to show you now. I want to reflect this, and I want to put, let's say, this particular triangle that I drew, which is not equilateral, I don't think, on each of the corners. So how do I do that? You have to reflect it. So you can either take it and duplicate it and start turning it around, rotating it, but basically you have to do all that in the object menu. So transform. So you can make another one, or you can reflect. And each one of these commands gives you the opportunity to copy instead of just, so I'm gonna copy it instead of, so it copied it and didn't just make another or reflect it. It didn't just reflect that one, it copied it, reflected. So I'm going to do that to both of these now at the same time so I can put them at the bottom both together. So I'm going to select them both together and then go object, transform, reflect, copy. It didn't reflect them. Oh, it's because I want them to do it. You have to change the axis that you're doing it over. Now notice the simplest things start to define the white, right? The moment you start cutting into the white and changing it in some definitive way, not arbitrarily or not randomly, but definitively, choosing shapes and that are very defined and doing things in a kind of symmetrical way, you start to make us more aware of a very well-defined area of the white space. So I'm going to continue this because now I've done one thing. I've done this with a triangle, but I haven't used different size shapes. So this looks so far like it is a symmetrical composition. It's actually radial too right now, but I'm going to keep going and I'm going to make it, I'm going to use a rectangle. I'm going to use some rectangles now. So it's going to be two shapes, two types of shapes, and I'm just going to make it symmetrical. But so this is a very large, what happens if I extend this even more? So I'm going to hold shift because I like the size of this rectangle, but I like the shape of it, but I don't like the size. So I'm just experimenting it and seeing what happens. Now notice that as I expand it, the white is going away and I don't have much white anymore. You know, maybe you like that, maybe you don't. Maybe you decide, I don't really like that. I'm going to make a chain of these of small rectangles. So I diminish the rectangle, put it at the center, and start to make copies. And you can actually diminish the size by a certain amount in transform every time. So I'm going to make, you know, some copies here. And then each of these, I'm going to do a multiple selection by holding shift. So I want this one and this one, but not the one in the middle. And then I'm going to go object, transform, scale. And every time it's going to be 75% of the last one. So let's just try that. So I can now place them at exactly the same spot. This is going to be a symmetrical, but not radial. You have to do some measuring here, obviously. And use the grid to measure. This became a rounded rectangle somehow. And I can diminish these as, I'll do it again, but I don't want this one to be, oops. Whoops. And I'm gonna have one more little teeny one and put them close together. So it looks like somehow it's bulging out at us, right? This was not right at the center and I wanted it to be. So move the whole thing down, and you need the horizontal axis, which I don't have. So I need it right now. So I'm gonna go to, let's see, it was 6, right? Yeah. So I'm selecting this whole group and moving it down so it's centered. Whoops, it also moved the guide. You can lock an object, you can lock a guide by going to guide, lock, and with objects, you can lock them. If you like where they are in position to each other, you can group them and then you can lock them in objects. So let's say I like this group, which I don't right now, but I like them in the relation they are to each other. So you go object, group, and then it's grouped. If you need to ungroup it, you can go object, ungroup. Now, in this case, notice that when I have multiple objects selected, an align command comes up here. And it gives you a way of aligning things to the right, aligning things to their center. The last ones here, if you hover above, it'll tell you what it is. Horizontal, distribute right. What I want is vertically distributed on center. Whoops. I should be able to, the guide is a problem, so I'm gonna have to hide the guide. So go to view, hide guides. And now you should be able to select all these and make it so they're all the same, equidistant to each other. So you should be able to do that in, that aligned the center. So if you like that, you could leave it like that. It has a definition of the white space. It starts to define the area in between. And you can work, you know, defining maybe more this area. Maybe if you put a bar all the way across or a bar now up and down. So I'm not done, I'm not finished, but I'm starting to define the white more. And also have different size shapes. Can you see that?